All right, let me give you some feedback from the previous week. So I hope that you found the scheduling of drugs interesting, because a lot of that may change here pretty soon, especially with marijuana and psilocybin mushrooms and some other psychedelics. If they start using those for medical purposes, especially for PTSD, addiction, and depression, and some forms or derivatives of marijuana for pain relief, then you may see different scheduling going on. So this will be relevant because you may hear information about that in the news. So next, we're coming up on homeostatic system, so homeostasis in the body, what drugs do to it. Mainly the autonomic nervous system, the central nervous system, especially when we're talking about hallucinogens, but even other drugs affect the central nervous system. So pay close attention to that. We'll talk about antagonist and agonist responses and changes within the body. So when you go through here, pay close attention to those major points. So again, homeostasis, what's going on with the nervous system, how these drugs influence the nervous system, how the nervous system functions, target cells, receptors, all that good stuff, agonist and antagonist receptors, and what happens and what effects certain drugs have on them, especially drugs that can shut down respiration, like opioids can shut down respiration, and blocking autonomic signals to the lungs to actually function. And then we have neurotransmitters, and so we talk about dopamine. Dopamine's a huge neurotransmitter, especially when we start talking about methamphetamines. And what happens over time there is you get a dopamine response, but it's a flood of dopamine into the system. This is how people get addicted to it. And then over time, you could take the same amount of that methamphetamine, but you don't produce as much dopamine. And then eventually the dopamine production gets less and less and less, and so you have to take more and more and more of these methamphetamines. That's how people get extremely addicted. Talk about central nervous system, the CNS, and peripheral nervous system, PNS, and the effects that they have. And so anyway, that's what's coming up, and that's what you should focus on for this week. But other than that, y'all had some pretty good responses. The only thing that I saw, a couple people, when they responded to other students, they didn't really provide any information. They're like, yeah, I agree with what you say, but they didn't really talk about why they agreed. I want more in depth. So if you saw some point deductions, it was probably because of that. Not because of your original response, it was your response to other students wasn't in depth. So at least 5 sentences in those responses to other students. Don't make them too short. I've been pretty lenient on that so far, but you should have your system down. So if I start to see that from this point on, you're going to start to notice more and more point deductions based on that, because you should understand how the grading system functions now. So we're in week 5, and you should finish that up so that we can run into week 6, and that'll be your first test. And all you'll have to do there to prepare for the first test, print off these quizzes, start to study those, and then use this review along with the quizzes, and you'll do fine.